Hi, Kevin Longley here. I hope you enjoyed that Gregorian chant. It's pretty impressive. I want to talk to you today about illuminated manuscripts. Uh, Illuminated manuscripts were handwritten Bibles that were produced in the Middle Ages between 600 to 1200 AD. This time period was also known as the Dark Ages because not very much artwork was produced. Artwork was not produced during this time period because of religious doctrine, which said that you could not worship false idols. Paintings and sculptures, things like that, those were considered false idols and should not be created. If you try to create that, I'm sure you might get your head chopped off. Believe it or not, some illuminated manuscripts still survive today and can be seen in many museums across the country. How were these manuscripts created? They were created by monks who were devoted to their religion. They were also devoted to the king that ruled their particular region in Europe. Oftentimes, kings would ask these monks to create a Bible from scratch. Since these monks were creating these Bibles for kings, they often designed them elaborately and made beautiful decorations. Oftentimes, they inlaid 14-karat gold leaf within the pages. The gold shining, being bright, that's where the term illuminated manuscript comes from. For our rendition of the illuminated manuscript, we are going to create an illuminated version of our last name. The very first initial of our last name is going to be created using what's called the design process. It's a pretty neat little process that can get you your own unique original letter. Projects are going to be rendered using colored pencil shading and layering, as well as an outlining pen and a thick black Sharpie. The first step in creating your illuminated last name project is to do some sketching. To do this, I've provided you with a worksheet that's called the Illuminated Letter Design Worksheet. This worksheet is going to allow you to sketch 3 different versions of the same letter. Using the design process, you're going to hopefully create an original letter that is one of a kind. The 4 steps of the design process are add, subtract, morph, or change into an object. Using these 4 steps, you should be able to create a pretty neat letter. If you'd like to apply a theme to your letter, you may want to do that during this sketch process. Themes such as nature, medieval theme, or even an off-the-wall theme will all work well for this assignment. All right, a little background. This is called the design process. This is a demonstration showing you the 4 steps in creating your own unique, original, creative, elaborate, one-of-a-kind, illuminated letter. So let's begin. First of all, the design process is just that. It's a way for you to start with a simple shape or drawing, and you go through 4 steps to make it your own unique, original drawing. In this case, we're working with letters. So to get started, I'm going to draw a basic Gothic L. And it should look something along that line there. Not bad. To start the design process, the first step that I'm going to go through, I'm going to start to change this L into my own L. So I'm going to add things to it. There are several things that you can do, or actually millions of things you can do. I'm going to start by adding some more flares or spikes to this thing. I want to make it look kind of medieval. I can add shapes to the background. So let's say I'm going to have a kind of starry looking cross shape. Maybe it's a sun. Another thing I can add to this is I can start to add actual objects. So in this case, I'm going to make this look like there's vines that are wrapping around the bottom of this L. And the line continues through here, comes across, and maybe it comes out and this is the end of the line over here. Okay, that's the first step. I can continue to add more, but I just want to give you an idea as to what adding means. Subtracting means you take away. You're taking something out of this. One way you can do that is you can actually physically take out a part of the letter. So I'm going to draw a line here, and I'm going to remove this section. So now it looks like these two pieces are separate. Another way that you can subtract is you can make things look like they're torn. So I'm going to take out a chunk of this, and maybe it looks like it's ripped there. Maybe it's ripped over here as well. So that's an idea of subtraction. Another way you can subtract is you can make it look like there's windows in here. So in other words, this would now be, these shapes would be see-through. So background, background. Maybe you've got another window up here. Okay. The next step is morph. This is where you can take a line, instead of this line being a straight line, maybe I want to erase it and I want to morph it and make it to a wavy line. Pretty simple step. Maybe this line down here, instead of curving down, it's going to be jagged. Okay, and then the last step is you can change things into shapes. I kind of like to think of this as like you're looking up at the clouds. You're trying to think of what those clouds look like. When I see this little shape down here, I think, well, I'm doing a kind of a medieval letter, so maybe I can turn that into some kind of a sword. This looks like a handle to me. So I want to bring that handle down a little bit, and maybe I can extend the blade of the sword up. And I can make this look more sword-like. There's a little handle of the sword. Maybe there's little blood droplets on it. I don't know. You can make your decisions there. So once you've completed the design process, the 4 steps, you should have a letter that is illuminated, it is bright, it's detailed, it's decorative, and it's completely different than what you started with. Therefore, you have created your own unique, original, creative, elaborate, one-of-a-kind illuminated letter. Okay, so you've got your printout of your first letter, which you've printed out in Microsoft Word. It's pretty large. The next step is we're going to start to work on our final drawing of our illuminated letter. So I'm going to take some tracing paper, line it up with the left side of the letter, and then I'm going to go ahead and trace that letter accurately. If you can trace as fast as I can, then you will be a legend. No, just kidding. Take your time, trace accurately. Once you're finished with your tracing, you are now going to complete your final drawing. So based on one of the sketches that you've chosen from your sketch sheet, you're going to redraw that sketch large and in charge on your tracing paper. And this is a finished example of my sketch. The next step is we are going to put the last part of our last name next to our L. You're going to want to type that into Microsoft Word, some sort of program, and you're going to print it, size it pretty large, and you're going to print it out. So here's mine. I'm going to place it underneath my tracing paper. This is kind of an important step. You need to decide where you want to line your name up with. You can line it up in the center here. You can line it up with the bottom if you'd like. The top doesn't look very good. I kind of like mine kind of in the center / bottom. You want it to read like a name. You don't want it to say L Ongley. You want it to read Longley, so it needs to read as a word. Once you've got it in place, go ahead and trace your last part of your last name. Trace accurately. And this is the finished version. Once you have your drawing completely finished, you are now ready to transfer it to your final drawing paper. So we're going to flip the tracing paper over, and on the back we're going to take and we're going to retrace our lines. So we're trying to put some graphite on the back. If you prefer to just scribble your pencil on the back like that, you can do that. And I've already got mine lines, the graphite on the back of my tracing paper. So we're going to lay this down to our fresh white paper, and you can tape it if you want to. And now you're going to retrace the front. Pretty firm pressure. The graphite that's on the back of your tracing paper will transfer through to your white paper. It's going to be kind of a ghost image, so you'll have to go back over your lines just to clean them up a little bit. I've finished tracing or transferring my drawing, and now I'm going to outline it. When you outline, you want to outline with a smooth, clean line. Use an outlining pen. Okay? You don't want chicken scratch. That's bad. For your last part of your last name, you're going to use a thick Sharpie. Again, outline accurately. I recommend you outline first and then color in with the Sharpie. You want these to be solid black. This is going to add some contrast to your finished piece and make the last part of your last name stand out and be more readable. Take an eraser, get rid of that graphite, and you're done outlining. Okay, so this is the coloring worksheet that you're going to use to practice what I call the glow technique. Kind of a way to use colored pencils to add some high contrast, bright, vivid colors to your illuminated drawings. At the top here, there's 3 bars, and you're going to follow directions to complete 3 different value scales. On the first bar here, I'm just putting a base layer of a light color. In this case, it's light green. And I'm layering it to show a change in value, or gradual change in value, from dark to light. So on the left side of the bar, the value is darker, and as it goes to the right, it fades to very light in value. So I'm showing a gradient here. I'm going to go ahead and do that same step for all 3 bars. And then in the second step, it's going to say that you need to take a medium value, a medium color, and add a layer, a shaded layer, over top of your base layer. So in this case, I'm using just regular green over top of my yellow green. Once again, I'm shading it from dark to light. I'm keeping my pencil strokes close together in the same direction, and I'm trying to show a gradual fade from dark to light. I want to go ahead and do that same step in box 3 as well. The last step is to take a dark color or black, and we're going to add a 3rd layer over top of the first 2 layers. And again, I'm just shading the black from dark to light, going probably about a quarter of the way, making it fade over top of the 2 green colors. This is the process that you're going to use on your illuminated drawings. And to get some further practice, we're going to practice coloring in some squares. So the first step is to shade all 4 squares of the base layer. Then you're adding shaded edges, using a medium color around the edges, and then adding black around the edge on the last square. And to further demonstrate that, I'm going to go ahead and do the second row of squares here using some oranges. So step number 1 is to apply a base layer. I'm using the hatching technique, cross-hatching technique, to make a nice smooth light base layer. So I'm going to go back the opposite direction, keep my pencil strokes really close together, and get a nice smooth base layer. Might take a few times, a few layers to get this nice and smooth. And I'm going to go ahead and make a nice smooth base layer in all 4 boxes of the row, because this is step number 1. So I'm doing step number 1 in all 4 boxes. Should look like this. Step number 2, in the box number 2, I'm going to go ahead and take the same orange that I used for my base layer, and this time I'm going to start to shade around the edges. So I'm pressing firmly on the outside of the square, and as I move towards the center, I'm easing up on the pressure of the pencil to create a gradient or a fade in value. I'm going to do that to all 4 corners. Keeping my pencil strokes very close together. Notice my pencil strokes are going parallel with the outside edge of the shape. And again, you're going to want to do this step in the next 2 boxes. It should look like this. And step number 3, I'm going to take my medium color, in this case it's going to be red, and I'm going to shade it around the outside edges. So I'm adding a layer of red to the outside edge. Again, pencil strokes in the same direction, they're parallel to the outside edge of the shape, and I'm trying to fade it in towards the center. You should start noticing that this square has a lot of contrast created because the edges are dark, the center is light, so that center is starting to kind of pop out, starting to be more vivid, more bright, and more bold. Thus, we call it the glow technique. I'm going to go ahead and do this step in the last box as well. It should look like this. And finally, the last step is to add black, a dark, solid kind of black edge around the shape. This is going to complete the glow technique. Anytime you add black next to a light color, it creates high contrast. Blacks tend to recede into the distance or go back into the distance, and lighter colors tend to come forward. And when you put them next to each other, it really adds kind of a pop effect to your drawings. So once again, I'm just adding some dark bold black around the edges. I'm trying to shade it or fade it in just a little bit. And there you have it, the glow technique. The bottom of the worksheet has some shapes that are a little awkward, but I think that they'll help you, if you practice those, they'll help you with your actual letter. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate here how to color on your illuminated letter. I've got 3 colors. I've got orange, red, and black. So you're going to want a light color, a medium color, and black. Just as we did in the worksheet, the very first step is to put a base layer. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this. Again, we want this to be nice and smooth and light in value. Step number 2 is I take the same pencil, and now I'm going to go ahead and start to add some shading to the outside edge of the shape. Keeping my pencil strokes close together as I move towards the center of the shape, I'm easing off the pressure. My strokes are parallel to the side of the shape that I'm working on. And fast forward. There we go. Step 3, I'm going to take my medium value, which in this case is red, and I'm going to add shading to the outside edge. I'm not going to fade it in quite as far as I did with the orange, but I'm still pressing firm and fading it in towards the center of the shape. And fast forward. And finally, the last step is to take your black, and again, we're going to add a dark edge. We're boldening up that outside edge, and this is going to create that contrast that I talked about. It's going to really help the color pop off the paper. And in essence, it's going to make the color glow. And that's why it's called the glow technique. If you want to add some jazz up the last part of your last name, there's a few things you can do. I'm going to go ahead and add an outline that is an even thickness around the last part of my last name. And there's all sorts of things I could do now. I could add color in here. I could add a design inside that outline. Lots of possibilities. Here's a finished version. Notice I've used different color schemes on different parts of my letter. The L still looks like an L. I've added a kind of a border around the outside of the last part of my last name and put some stripes in it or design, and also added some colors that are associated with the letter. Visual assessment rubrics. These are rubrics that are designed for you to look at to compare your work to projects that meet expectations, exceed expectations, and do not meet expectations. This is an example of a project that exceeds expectations. The design is incredibly detailed, well thought out. Coloring is shaded, all steps are visible. There is a border around the outside of the name, and they also put a halo around there emphasizing the last part of the last name. Very well done. This project meets expectations. The illuminations are done pretty well, pretty simplistic. Coloring's pretty good, most of the steps are there. They do have a border and a halo around the outside of the last name, and it's rendered pretty well. It's a good project. And this does not meet expectations. The illuminations are very weak or not existent. The coloring is limited. There is no shading evident. The border, no ruler use, and the halo is uneven. And this is the grading rubric which you will be graded on. Illuminations, using the colored pencil layering technique or the glow technique, having some sort of design or halo around the last part of your last name, and always having good craftsmanship.